Well, welcome to Rules and Regulations. Again, I'm Rob Peterson. You see this beautiful picture in front of you, and that is Lake Champlain in South Hero, looking over towards the Adirondacks. And there is not a single rule or regulation being violated in this picture because there isn't a single human being in that picture that we can tell. So we're going to go, we have 50 minutes here to go over the foundations of rules and regulations. I'm going to just kind of review some of the class content here. I have a quick rules survey that I'm going to throw in the chat. I'm going to talk a little bit about the limits of our authority. We're going to look back to last season. I was able to extract a little bit of information from our incident report data to examine what types of incidents that we're seeing. Ethan Phelps is going to go over the philosophy of our rules and the purpose of our rules, and then kind of the tone of enforcement that we use. And then finally, Quentin is going to take us home with our top 10 rules, talk about the gray area and a few other things. So welcome to this session. Rules and regulations can be kind of a challenging, somewhat intimidating at times subject to think about because it makes you kind of go to uncomfortable areas. You have to ask people to do things differently than perhaps they're currently doing, and that can generate fears, anxieties. It can also be kind of funny because people do lots of different things, and sometimes it's very unwittingly that they're doing things. We have a statewide enforcement training, and anyone who's been around a long time, they know that we put a lot of emphasis on not only rules and regulations, but how to properly enforce our rules, which is one of the most challenging things that we actually do in state parks. We have two rules and statewide enforcement trainings set up June 7th and June 9th. We've divided the state into halves. So the southern part of the state will go to Bombazine on June 7th, and the northern half of the state will go to Elmore State Park on June 9th. So mark your calendars for that. And then regionally, enforcement training for from when you open until those trainings will be held within each region if needed, where people haven't done enforcement before. So are you always a rule follower? I'm going to pull up the chat here, and I've created a survey, and hopefully that works. So it's just a quick survey. Just take a couple of minutes to fill out the survey. I'll give you a few minutes. It's just a few questions to go through to find out if you are always a rule follower. And I'll just admit to you right now that I am not always a rule follower myself. All right, so I'll continue as people are filling out the survey, and we'll look at the results of that survey at the end of the class. But I want to talk a little bit about the limits of our authority. At the end of the day, we wear polo shirts. We don't have badges, and we don't have guns because we're rule educators. We specifically have a uniform that doesn't look like a law enforcement uniform. We can't issue citations. We can't issue tickets as much as maybe at times we'd like to. We can't do that. We are basically armed with common sense and the knowledge and understanding of our rules. And, you know, I wish somebody had said to me long ago when I was in the rule enforcement business in the park setting that, you know, the only person you can control is yourself. There's going to be, you know, we had 1 million visitors last year in the parks. And I would argue that we can't control what any of them do. We can educate them, we can talk to them, we can try and encourage them, but we can't control them. And there's a big difference there between controlling and educating. So our incident report data for 2021, we had 493 total incidents, and that doesn't include any of our nuisance wildlife reports. So we were busy last year. So I was able to sort of look specifically at, you know, like what kinds of rules were being broken. And, you know, I was able to just do basic keyword searches and some of the categories that we select. But noise was a big one, you know, about 40 or just less than 10% of all the rules being broken or all the incident reports being written up. The word rules was cited 39 times in our incident reports. Alcohol, shockingly, was only written about 30 times. Quiet hours, 27 times, and that seems shockingly low. I have to believe that that was only for the 4th of July. Dogs were listed 20 times, still surprisingly low. And then fireworks were listed 10 times. At the end of the day, there's probably a lot more data in the incident report database that I wasn't able to extract. But as you can see, there's a lot of rules being written about, and then a lot of incident reports. Just a lot of these rule infractions just don't rise to the level of an incident report. So I put this slide in here really to just tell you right now that paper signs have very, very limited impact on behavior. In fact, signs in general have really minimal impact on behavior. I was once a believer in signs, and I've made all kinds of signs back in the day to try and impact behavior, and painfully discovered that you know, behavior can't be changed because people don't read the signs to begin with. So one thing that we heavily discourage is trying to get people to comply with our rules and regulations through lots of sort of temporary paper signs. Paper signs are great for putting up a sign at the contact station. We will be back in 10 minutes. Had to go, do whatever you had to do. That is a perfect example of a sign and communicating a message, but it's not a rule. So as you make your way through the summer and you see things that are happening, please just keep in mind that paper signs have very minimal impact because people just don't read them. And I even have a sign that says, please read the signs. It's made out of wood. It's state parks sanctioned, and I haven't put it up, but one day I might. So with that being said, I'm going to kick things over to Ethan Phelps, who's going to talk about our rule philosophy, and hopefully I can stop sharing here.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I'm
Yep.
gonna take a second here to share my screen. See that worked and everybody can see it. Okay. So good morning, everyone. So as we transition here from philosophy and science, we're going to talk a little bit more deeply about the philosophy and how we create our rules are created and how we enforce them. As we started to hear from Rob, this session is the first building block in our philosophy and our methodology to rule and regulation enforcement. And we'll spend the next few minutes discussing who our park visitors are, what their motivations are for visiting our state parks, how our rules are developed, a little bit more about the how we get the authority to develop them, and why we need them. Okay. So who are our visitors? Where are they from, and what are they like? We know that our visitors are Vermonters, about 40% of our campers, 65% of our day use visitors. And those numbers are pre-pandemic, so they've changed a little bit since then. And we've seen a pretty dramatic increase even in the last 2 years in our Vermont visitors. We started coming in bigger numbers in 2020 and stayed, but those are relatively accurate still. They're also out-of-staters, mostly from other New England states in the Northeast, but also we have a fair number of international visitors who have been, for the most part, missing in the last 2 years, but will start coming back to see us again this year. Places like Quebec, other U.S. states from further away, and even many other countries. We know that. Hold on. Sorry, I've got to move something here so I can see the rest of my screen. We know that our rules, we know our rules and how to behave in our parks, or at least we all will by the end of your training here this week. But our visitors may not know that. They may not speak English as their first language, or in some cases, they may not speak English at all. They may not hear, they may not see, they may not read or write English or any other language. Our visitors have widely varied economic backgrounds, social backgrounds, and life experiences. So what's this all mean for us? And when we think about rules and regulations and enforcement, it means that we must be thoughtful and professional when approaching enforcement situations. When we encounter someone that's as rigid as a wall, our attitude has to be fluid like water, and we have to be able to flow around that rigidity. Our overall enforcement philosophy is education. And sometimes we have to give our visitors the benefit of the doubt and not assume the worst or assume anything at all. Why do people come to our parks? Well, for all sorts of reasons. And my guess is that it's many of the same reasons why you have chosen to work here. They're fantastic places to recreate, to relax, and doing so in a safe and welcoming environment in the outdoors. Our parks have a reputation for being clean, family-friendly, safe, and relaxing. We've been seeing over 1 million visitors a year in our parks in recent years, and that number will undoubtedly continue to grow this year. People visit our parks because they want to, and that sets us apart and gives us an advantage from many other governmental entities where people are interacting with the public because they have to. Think about your experiences the last time you went to go to the DMV to renew your driver's license. I don't think many people view that as a positive or necessarily pleasant experience, or even the court system. This is good news for us because when people are willingly interacting with us and using the services that we provide because they want to, it generally makes approaching enforcement situations much easier and safer. So let's talk a little bit about laws and our rules. And so what is a law anyways? There are 3 main types of law: civil law and criminal law, both of which are based on statute. So those are established by a legislative body who create and pass laws. And that's in contrast to common law, which is how laws are made based on court decisions. Our rules that we establish fall under civil law, and the penalties for civil laws are fines, not incarceration or capital punishment. Note, like Rob said, we don't have a fine system in our parks, and that makes our authority even more limited. So how do we get the authority that we do have in our to make our rules. Nate gave us a great overview of the rulemaking process that we have to go through. And as you saw, it's pretty lengthy and pretty involved and provides a lot of opportunity for input. As he said, the process started in September and is still ongoing for the rules that we hope to get created in this coming year. Specifically, there's a state statute that allows us to create rules. It's Vermont Statute Title 10, Section 2603C of the Vermont Statutes Annotate, if you want to look it up and read it. And that's the specific law that gives us the authority to establish policy. This gives the commissioner of our department, whom we met yesterday, the authority to establish policy that guides visitor behavior for the protection of resources on our lands. And these policies give us the sideboards to establish rules. So what's a policy? A policy is a general framework for establishing the guidelines for an activity. What's a rule? A rule is a specific method of defining an acceptable action or behavior for enacting a policy. Our rules define specific threshold for acceptable behavior, and that's things like quiet hours, where to park, stuff like that. When thinking back to the session that we just attended, we're giving more thought and attention to how our rules may create barriers to some groups, and we're working hard to accommodate solutions or hopefully remove those barriers altogether. In short, we want to make sure that our rules don't exclude certain people or groups, but they hopefully create an environment where expectations are clear and then there's opportunity for all. But we know and acknowledge that we have more work to do here. In our case, our policies are adopted internally, drafted by a team of experts, and reviewed and approved by the commissioner or agency secretary. Our rules go through a legislative process, the one that Nate outlined, that allows both elected officials and the general public to weigh in before they become effective. This holds true for all of our rules and many of our fees. So what are we doing with our rules, and what are we protecting, and why are they effective? As I just mentioned earlier, our rules provide a general acceptable limits of behavior by establishing clear boundaries. Some of our rules protect people. We have some rules to protect visitors, like from things like unsafe behavior, things like no glass containers on a beach, because broken glass can create a safety hazard to other beachgoers. Some rules protect the visitor experience. A good example of this one is our quiet hours. This hopefully ensures that everyone can expect a decent night of rest, at least from visitor disruptions. Unfortunately, we can't guarantee disruptions from raccoons or loons at night. They tend to be not so compliant with quiet hours. Some rules protect resources. For instance, we don't allow people to cut trees down for firewood or camp where they please. And many decades ago, the decision was made to provide firewood to our campers and not allow them to cut their own wood because the woods were starting to thin out and get too sparse. And people started putting up tents in forest adjacent to campsites and expanding campsite footprints and compacting soil. Now, for the most part, our campsites are well spaced and have a decent screening of vegetation between them. But if you go and camp in some other states that don't provide firewood, you can see evidence of the impacts of that. Another good example of a rule protecting a resource is not feeding wildlife. For example, feeding ducks on a waterfront can lead to bacterial water quality problems and swim area closures. So why do we need all these rules anyways? Well, we know that there are bound to be some issues. With an average of over 1 million visitors every year, that's enough people that we need to provide a framework for how we expect people to act and respect each other, respect us and the resources and the facilities that we take care of and protect. Rob provided us with some great data on our incidents, and as he said, there are many more unreported interactions based on our rules that don't make it to incident level. And this is because of the great work that you all do as taking the educational approach to head off most situations before they rise to the incident level. Our rules also help you out when you need to address the visitor's behavior and action and need something that you can point to. Rules keep the playing field even for all visitors and hold everyone to the same standards of accountability. Our rules come in two forms. There's a PDF document that you can see here. That's our official rule document that is available from our state parks website, and its technical title is the Rules and Regulations of Visitor Conduct, Fees and Charges for State Park Services and Commercial Activities on State Lands. We distill that down into a very, very simple poster that we post in campgrounds that's just a few bullet points. And you contrast that to some other things. The other document you see here on your screen is an example of rules that you get when you go to an Army Corps recreation facility. You know, this is a multi-fold out 12-panel brochure that's in about 5-point font that I guarantee you no one is ever going to read. So we try to keep it simple. So how do rules impact our visitors? Well, of course, we know that few people like to be told that they're doing something wrong. And when we approach someone to ask them to change their behavior, it can be a complex interaction. It can put somebody on the defensive. So we always remember to keep our interactions friendly and casual, but also professional and to the point. Talk to a rule offender on the side, like having a difficult conversation with an employee. No one wants to be seen getting reprimanded or get called out in front of a group. Occasionally, visitors may get hostile. The regional staff will be giving you additional training, and you'll be attending in-person enforcement training if you haven't already done that, as Rob said, in early June. We also need to keep in mind the backgrounds and life experiences and perceived expectations that people may have about interacting with government employees or those in an enforcement situation. The bottom line is that you need to keep yourself safe while being respectful. And you'll be hearing a whole lot more about this when we do more enforcement training in June. So how do you feel when you see somebody breaking a rule and have to enforce it? Personally, I hate it. It can be uncomfortable. You may get nervous. Your heart rate may increase. You may start to sweat, become unsure of yourself, or feel threatened. Believe me, I've felt all of these things in my time. Again, you'll be getting additional training on how to handle these situations and how to prepare yourself to have a successful interaction with somebody, with the key of keeping yourself safe and not letting someone else's behavior impact your own. So the tone of how we enforce our rules and our behavior sets the example for our visitors, and it will dictate how your interactions will play out during the course of enforcement. Thank you, and I'm going to turn things back over to Quentin.
All right, great, thanks, Ethan. Just give it a second here to move over. All right, so in my section, we're going to be talking specifically about the top 10 rules that we have in state parks. And to kick off my section, I will be dropping a quick survey in the chat. And if you guys could just take 30 seconds to a minute to do that, that would be great. And we will review that at the end if we have time. Just give you guys a second to do that. And as Ethan said, you can find all these rules and regulations in our state park manager manual. I will drop that link as well in our chat. And Ethan just dropped the other one. If you guys do want to follow along, I will reference the section in the state park manual as we go along here. To get started, the first rule that we'll go over is 310.1. It's pets. Pets are designated in areas around the park that are designated areas, and they should be confined to a leash no greater than 10 feet. Number 2 is in section 310.8 is generator usage. All generator usage is confined to the hours of 8 to 10 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. Number 3 is in section 310.19. Fire should be kept under control at all times and in designated fire pits or grills. Number 4 is in 320.5. There should be no smoking in smoke-free zones and only in designated parts of the park or in designated areas in the day use areas. Number 5 is 330.3.A. Check-in time is between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m. of the day of your arrival, and checkout is at 11 a.m. on the day of your departure. Number 6, and this is always one that you will want to review many times throughout the year to make sure that everybody is saying the correct thing, because you will get lots of questions on it, is our cancellation policy or a refund. Cancellations can be done anytime before 2 p.m. before the day of your arrival. As long as you do that, you will receive a full refund, less the cancellation fee and any reservation fee paid. Also, if you cancel after 2 p.m. before your expected day of arrival, you'll get a refund, less the required minimum stay fees and the reservation fee. And if you do have some questions about this stuff, please refer to the manual, and it should explain it in more detail than what we can go over in this short amount of time, just for everyone's information. Number 7, quiet hours is in 330.5. Are between 10 p.m. and 7 p.m. every evening. Number 8, 330.8. The number of vehicles on a campsite, which are a maximum of two cars per site. Number 9 is in 330.9. is camper visitor hours are between 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. and every visitor should be issued a car tag, a day use car tag on entry. And the most important rule, and one that we'll go over in more detail, is number 10, and is not written in your ranger manual, is what we call the gray area. And what I like to tell people about this part of the training is the best thing is to use common sense and best judgment. And what I'll do is I'll give you guys some examples on what I mean by that. Sure, we have rules that you can lean back on when you're having a problem with somebody, or you need to have a conversation where someone is breaking a rule and it's a safety hazard, or it's causing problems with other campers or something like that. But there's other times when maybe the campground isn't that busy, or they're breaking a rule that really doesn't affect anybody to that level where you really need to lean on the rule to make someone comply with the rule. And an example of that is pets. Our rules state that they have to be on a leash no longer than 10 feet. But if someone has a pet on a 12-foot leash, do we really care? Is that really affecting other visitors in the area? And the answer is no, it's not. And it's not really something that you really need to address. We definitely have bigger fish to fry. Another great example is our check-in time. And yes, this rule is great for us as managers and assistants to lean on, say on a Saturday, and you have a bunch of turnover sites and you're a little short-staffed and you're waiting, for some of your attendants to get the last sites cleaned up. So you can definitely lean on that rule. If someone showed up early, say they show up at 11 and they want to check in, you definitely lean on that. Please hang out in the park, go down to the day use area. We'll get you checked in as soon as we can, but we can't guarantee any sites before 2 p.m. Another example of this on the other spectrum of things would be, say, opening day, the Friday before Memorial Day. People might show up to start checking in when you open up the gates at 10 o'clock or maybe even at noon. That's definitely something that's completely okay. sure, it's kind of bending our rule, but it's definitely in our best interest to use best judgment and to make sure that the best possible customer service is given to each of our guests. So that's one of those areas that's it's a very gray area, but when you're using your best common sense and best judgment, that it'll make sure that we are giving the best possible customer service that we can to every guest that comes through our gates. So that pretty much concludes my section, except for my survey. Just give me a second. How did you guys all like the surveys?
I found my own survey to be really amusing. And I can't wait to share it.
So I think we can share survey results now. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, go for it. Why don't you? I think people were only able to pick one of your top 10.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
definitely for the results, the top one was quiet hours, which actually is in the top 10. So that was great. And the second highest one were pets. So that is also in the top 10. And the last one was check-in. And we only got 3 people who checked on that one. So we got 2 out of 3 as the top in the top 10. So we did really well. You guys did really well.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here for the results of breaking the rules. And I'm happy to say that it only took about 1 minute and 5 seconds to complete this survey. And that 78% of you will be incredibly empathetic and understanding for those people who break rules this summer, because 78% of you who responded to the survey admitted that you had broken a rule while going to a park. In terms of whether they knew that or not, it looks like 64% of the people knew they were breaking the rule, and only 21% weren't aware of it. Oh, whoops, actually, and then there were 15% that were of the NA. Very, very equal here in terms of like when the rule was actually broken. It's pretty even distribution. Some of it dates back quite a while ago, but some of it was very recent. So it'll be really fresh in your minds this summer. And what might have prevented you from breaking a rule? Nothing. Looks like about a third. A well-written sign. Looks like 7 people thought a sign might have stopped them from breaking the rule. And let's look at the really interesting stuff here. Let's see what you actually did. See, they're all anonymous, just like I promised. Alcohol in a Mass State Park. Someone has a rock collection from National Park. Wash dishes in the sink. Classic. Going off trail, dogs off leash. I'm guilty of that myself. Peed outside. Camping too long for 3 months. Must be someone's got a van. Tying things to trees. Firewood, more dogs. Large group of kids. Trespassing. More dishwashing. Leaving past checkout time. Kind of one of the annoying ones if someone's coming back onto a site. So quite a few here. I'm really proud of all of you for being honest, and hopefully this leads to a level of empathy this summer. So unless we have anything else, do we have any questions, comments, anything to, any questions about rules?
There was a question from the staff at Maidstone about what time of the day to stop charging day use entry. And I think that probably refers to kind of the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. You know, I think it's a judgment call. Do you want to charge somebody day use entry like 18 minutes before sunset? Probably not. It's probably a good time to close down the contact station and make sure you're getting out there to clean up the park. I don't think we have like a set cutoff time, but it's really a judgment call, and I think you'll see a pattern in your parks when people really stop coming. And I think at a certain point, when you stop being in the contact station, it's a great time to stop charging. A lot of people just want to come in and take a quick look, but it's really a judgment call on your part. I think you know your visitors best. And Ethan or Quentin, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a great response, Rob.
I also agree.
Being confronted by staff should have been a factor option for not breaking the rule. Okay, it's a good one. It's true. You got educated. Any other questions? Did I miss anything else in the chat?
That was it for questions in the chat, Rob.
Okay, great. So we've got about 10 extra minutes of lunch time. We're going to be firing back up at 12:30 with The Nature of Vermont with Rebecca Roy, which always promises to be a great session. So enjoy your lunch and have a break, and we'll see you back here at 12:30. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.